You are listening to the We Need to Talk About Oscar podcast, and this is our interview with Eve production designer Jess Gonchor.
Some of the subject matters that I worked on are pretty heavy duty, or they're really dark comedies, and I love working on those as well. But I think I was just at a time and a place in my life when I wanted to sort of lighten up the subject matter that I was working on, and it was a great experience and just a fun ride to be on.
We usually start our interviews with asking our guests about their core memories that either made them fall in love with films in general or made them go into filmmaking. So how about you?
I think for me, it wasn't so much the film, but creating environments for telling visual stories. I really started in the theater and sort of accidentally navigated my way into movies, which I'm definitely happy about. You certainly get a chance to express yourself as much as theater, if not more. But I think I just fell in love with telling a visual story in the theater, and then I got to work on some films early on, and I just sort of caught the bug and have been doing it ever since. I mean, literally since high school, so a long time.
You first worked with John Krasinski, well, as him being the director on his second directing job, A Quiet Place Part 2. And now on his third, If, which is a completely different genre.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, in general, it couldn't be any more different the way I see it.
Fun.
Just looking at this, or as an overall as well, how do you see his learning curve as a director and this change in genres? And also, how did this affect your talks about the projects in question?
Well, I mean, I think John he's an amazing writer and director, and he's got, a solid idea going into the job. And he's a very visual person, and he brings some amazing, ideas and writes very descriptive scenes on the page, which helps me out a lot. But yeah, they were two completely different movies, both written from his heart and and what was happening inside. I can't really speak to the Quiet Place that much, but I know this last one, If, was very much experience that he's had with his kids and being a father to them and all of those things. So that was a world that he had definitely had a solid idea of what he wanted to do, keep something imaginary, but grounded in some sort of reality and not go too far into an unrealistic world, which this thing could have easily slipped into something extremely fantastical, but it got stopped short of that. And, John had a ton of guidance in that. So yeah, the two movies were completely different. One was a horror movie. This was a children's movie with a good ending. So, but I think that he's just a talented dude and could go any direction that he wants to. So it's not that I saw anything that he grew on with the second one I worked with him, because he was pretty solid to go into the first movie that I worked with him. I think he could just sort of he thinks quickly, he decides things quickly, and he has a good idea going in. So it's great to work with him in that sense.
A bit sticking with genres and targeted age groups, even though your previous works include films, and I don't want to make you feel all that I saw for the first time when I was 9 or 10 years old. So we could say that some of these can be watched and understood by a person of any age. However, I feel like movies specifically made for children haven't really been, I wouldn't say up your alley, but that's present for you.
Yeah.
How was this for a change?
Yeah. Well, that's an excellent question, and you're 100% right. I feel like, it was a kid's movie, but I think it was also a family movie and sort of touched all ages, as they say. But for me, it felt really good to work on on something like this because some of the subject matters that I worked on are pretty heavy duty or they're really dark comedies. And I love working on those as well. But I think I was just at a time and a place in my life when I wanted to sort of lighten up the subject matter that I was working on. And it was a great experience and just a fun ride to be on. I don't know, you have to sort of like you have to. One thing I know is that you have to change with the times. Not that this is changing with the times, but you also have to sort of like mix up your resume a little bit and just do things that you're not so comfortable with. And this was certainly out a little outside my comfort zone because it was considered, a kids movie and targeted at younger kids and families and things like that. So it took me Actually, it didn't took me a minute because I've been around those, kids and all that stuff all my life, but it was definitely a different approach to my normal films. But I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it's just a lot more colorful than the things I usually work on, both in texture and palette wise, but also subject matter. And I just had a really enjoyable time doing it.
Amazing. And an other thing that made me think in regard to John is how he speaks about this movie being the most personal and most important in his career up until now, and quite likely till the end of times. Now, obviously, it's a bit different for you as a production designer, since it's rather your responsibility to bring to life someone else's words and ideas. But still, looking back on your career, do you have a project that was special from the get-go, or one that became personal in the process?
I mean, not the best answer, but they all become personal because like being a production designer, you really have to become an expert on a subject in a very short time, like maybe sometimes 4 months, sometimes 6 months, sometimes, a little bit more. You take on, if there's a project you want to work on and it's with a director or a subject matter that is not personal to you, but you sort of identify or you want to take it on, you have to become immersed in that world and take it very personally. So really all of them. There have been some project that I've taken on more personally than others. One was with the Coen brothers, Serious Man. It was about a Midwestern suburban Jewish family and a bar mitzvah. I feel like that's something that I experienced in my life. So identified with it quite a bit. And every movie I've done with Bennett Miller, I just have such a strong connection with him and the subjects that he has tackled. And they're all the ones that I've did in, sort of, I don't know, Foxcatcher and Moneyball and not so much Capote, but I'm a big sports fan. So sort of Foxcatcher and Moneyball, while they're not sports movie, they're sort of built around a team of some kind. So those have been every movie I've done, I really haven't had anything. They've all been pretty personal to me because you also put in a ton of time and, and you start to do one of these things and it just sort of like, for better or worse, that becomes your life for, 4, 5, 6, 7 months and things like that. So you really have to, it would, if you didn't take them personally, it would be, I don't think it, wouldn't be great. Wouldn't be great for me anyway. So that's how I feel about those.
Something that's really fascinating to me in If is how you had to design the set in order for the imaginary friends themselves to be able to navigate through it, because
Yeah.
this must have been quite a challenge. What was your general approach while taking this aspect of the job into account?
Well, you're right. We had to sort of figure that whole thing out. And, and with the man upstairs, Ryan's apartment was supposed to be sort of like an imaginary version of what Bee remembered and what she knew about her grandmother's apartment. So they're pretty similar, except one doesn't have any 90-degree angles and it's just a lot, it has a lot of curves in it and a lot of sort of endless boundaries for imagination. And that's Ryan's apartment upstairs. And so for that, we had you had to be something intimate enough that it would be believable to be in that building, but also big enough for the character of Blue to get around in there. And that was sort of something that we worked on. And actually, John, who's like I think 6'3", he had some of the elements of that, puppet head he would carry around an arm and things like that, and sort of mimic, the size of Blue. So we really experimented with that, with ceilings we raised and lowers, and so it was like the thing was definitely evolved so all the characters could fit in the movie, and it was a learning curve that we all had to experience. We sort of worked it out on Ryan's apartment, and then some of the other environments were the retirement home and things like that were spaces that we took some of that approach and applied to the other built sets and locations that we had.
And just as a whole, I was so happy to see the level in which the set was actually built, and creating a set where interacting can be somewhat satisfying, but above all, possible, of course. How important is this to you?
It's very important with anything that's tangible for actors to get involved with, and environments that create that can be real is very important to me, and certainly important on this one because all the characters that were in it were going to be some sort of a CGI, and that was great. So when you put CGI characters into a CGI world, it just takes on a whole nother feeling. So we all felt that the sets would have to be as real as possible, and they were. There wasn't any. All the sets were 100% built. I mean, there was a couple of visual effects with some of that hallway and those flipping tiles, but all the other things, like when a wall came down, you saw, a castle and a space, and all that was real. There was not a ton. Sure, there was some visual effects, but we tried to do everything as real as possible, and I think we succeeded at that. So it was really just important to be able to have something, have the sets be as real as possible to motivate the actors so they could be lit well and they could be shot practically and not have to be thought about later. And then later you'd have to think about, oh, we're putting in all of these CG characters. How's that going to work with the set? We had something, the tone was set from the set, so they had their boundaries to work in, and I thought it worked really good, well together.
And as a final question, a rather technical one. As far as I know, you wrapped on SNL 1975 last week. And I know you can't tell much about it, so I don't even want to put you on the spot. However, what I'd like to ask you is, how do you shift your thinking or your whole mindset when going from a contemporary setting like If to turning back the wheel of time and going into such an era-specific project like SNL 1975?
Yeah, it's another good question. And I think that's just how I don't know. I've been doing it for a while, but I've been doing it at not at the same level, but at the same, sort of just amount of that I put into it. Has always maintained, the same level of intensity that I put into it. I've just always been attracted to visual stories. And like I said before, sometimes you don't know, a subject about something, and you have to dive into it and learn about it, and also learn enough to do a good job, but maybe not too much. So you're not that influenced on, so you're open to more ideas. That's a kind of like, unless you're doing a documentary, which I don't do, but you have to definitely switch gears and figure it out. With the 1975, I'm so familiar with that show, growing up with it and working. I also worked in sketch comedy, doing sets for a few shows like that. Even some in like the early 90s, I worked at a place that did some of the sets for SNL, like fabricated them, building them. I've also designed a bunch, and I've worked in that. I've just worked in the theater so much. So and that's very theatrical, the way they do the SNL live with the sets coming up and down. And so I totally identified with it and was able to, switch, because sometimes I can't. Sometimes I read something and I'm like, this is really good, but I'm probably not the right person to do that, which could be sometimes hard to do, turning down things. But so anyway, go from If to SNL was not such a big jump for me, because I knew a lot about the subject of SNL, and I thought I could help make a difference in that show. So I was fortunate enough to do it.
Well, I really hope we can catch up sometime next year and talk about SNL 1975 because
Yeah, sounds great to me.
can't wait. Well, Jess, thank you so much for taking the time. It was really an honor talking to you.
Oh,
Thank
I
you.
appreciate that. Yeah, I enjoyed it.